right, welcome to SaaS Connect. I'm Kelly Sarabin. I'm the Director of Marketing at Pandium, and I'm your host today. And we're here with Cristina Flaschen. We're going to be talking about how to build out a tech partner program. If you're not already a member of the Cloud Software Association, please go join. There's over 4,000 people in the Slack. I've been a member for over 2 years. It's a great group. Someone in there will answer your question if it's related to partnerships. There's also the SaaS Connect Metaverse coming up June 23rd. So that's another conference, but you don't have to go anywhere. So go to the Cloud Software Association and check it out. So Cristina, just to kick us off, can you give us a little background? So you've been working in SaaS integrations, for over a decade. Can you sort of tell us about your journey, how you got started, how you ended up founding Pandium?
Yeah, absolutely. And nice to see some folks again for the second, maybe third time. So as Kelly mentioned, I've been working in technology partnerships and integrations for over 15 years and spent a lot of that time managing teams that were building out these apps. So I've worked closely with hundreds of partner leaders with apps that are powering thousands of businesses and have really watched the transition of integration from something that was really focused on operational efficiencies to a revenue generating lever for increasingly smaller companies. We see all companies of all sizes now that have app ecosystems. So during that process, I've used a bunch of different tools, all the kind of best in breed stuff to try to solve this problem, and was not happy with the experience of using a lot of that tooling. And it was a really challenging thing to build and support all of these integrations. So we wanted to build something that was better and decided to found Pandium to do that.
Awesome. So, I think when people think about building their tech partner program, whether you're at a smaller SaaS company that's early stages, or whether you're at a larger mid-market inheriting a program and you're just trying to analyze it, the first step that can be really useful is to think through all the different ways that you can set your North Stars for your tech partner program. So in your experience, what are those different North Star metrics? Like every organization, depending on their goals, is going to pick different ones to focus on, but what are some of the ones that everyone should be thinking of and considering, even if they go in a different direction?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, a business always wants to make more money, right? So there's different ways to do that. You can do that through having better close rates, higher ACV, shorter sales cycles, and acquiring new customers. And you can also do it through retention. So reducing your churn, having better NPS, potentially upselling customers, and reducing, as you say here, reducing the overall spend to bring new business into the organization. I think these goals will vary based on where you are as a business in terms of your kind of growth stage. If you're a company that's just starting out, bringing in new logos, maybe the number one thing that you're looking for and getting some of that social proof. But if you're a little bit farther along, maybe it's more about retention and upselling. So really, it's going to be dependent on the stage of the business.
Yeah, and I think that reducing that internal spend for the same output is really so important at any stage. And I think, part of understanding your program is understanding where your organization has the highest needs. So a lot of times, there's a shortage of developers or product people, and tech partnerships can really basically get you this outsourced workforce, right? Like your tech partners are building integrations that increase your own product's functionality. So it's essentially like having this outsourced workforce. But, other people might be strong on that front. And what they're really looking for is an outsourced marketing and sales team, in which case you want to lean in more to the go-to-market. But once you sort of understand these are the different goals that you might have, and you sort of kind of have to iterate on what they are for your organization, you want to lay out a program, right? Like at any scale, you can't just, email your partners and have these like small relationships, which are great when you're just starting out. But once you think of any level of scale, you need a program, right? And sort of what are the, core elements that go into building an effective program at a high level?
Yeah, I think again, a lot of this goes back to like shared goals, KPIs, which in my purview often is based on money for both parties. So I think first aligning on what the goals of the partnership actually are is really important. Like, is it really just go to market and co-branding? Is it lead sharing? Is it going to be like leads flowing in one specific direction? Is it feature gap filling? I think there's a variety of different ways that you can think about this, but you've highlighted some great points here about attracting partners, prioritizing partners. So who are the folks that you would see as being highly valuable? How do you want to monetize this? So are you charging for specific elements of your product? Are you charging for the integration? Are you doing API call based? Is it going to be something that is really more focused on rev share for new leads? And then how are you going to communicate and iterate to get to success? It's all well and good to have a whole bunch of partners, but having some sort of cadence and process to be able to iterate and continue to brand and market with that company is important to kind of lay out in the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And something that is sort of really important to think about when you're designing your program is that it's not static, right? Like once you launch a program and you put all these elements into place, you have to at the same time put in feedback loops so that you are actually taking the results that you're getting and sort of funneling them back to all these different functional areas so that you can continue to evolve the program over time, because nobody knows exactly the right thing out of the box. And also markets change, right? Like right now, the economy is really shifting in how things are working. So you really have to be able to ensure that you're not building something static.
100%. So yeah, what do we need to make that happen? And I think a big theme that we've been seeing over the past like 6 months in content around partnerships was around alignment, right? If folks have heard me speak before, I talk a lot about how tech partnerships specifically touch a lot of different departments. So you're going to be looking at business development, marketing, which is more channel and sort of reseller partnerships sit solely there, but also product and engineering, and getting some of those resources can be really challenging. So ensuring that you have sort of top-down alignment, I think, is really important and can be challenging. But I will say, a lot of you folks, if you are technology partnership managers, somebody at your organization decided that this was going to be a good idea and wanted to have headcount and hire you. So there's somebody up high that is interested in seeing this succeed. Again, we talked briefly about partner alignment, being able to ensure that you're all aligned with the same goals. I just mentioned cross-functional collaboration. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that in terms of internal processes, but making sure that when you start this process, you understand who needs to be involved, even if it's not sort of immediately apparent. And then tracking results and sharing those results with everyone that's involved in this exercise, which could be like most of your company, candidly.
Yeah. And, I think if you can nail these 5 things, which, there's only 5, but it actually can be exceedingly difficult to get them all, then you will have a successful program. I think that, the cross-functional collaboration requires strategic and partner alignment, but it's also significantly more complicated in that the execution of it, right? It's not just saying we all have the same KPIs or North Star metrics, because you can align on that strategic level, but then are the people all the way down to, your individual contributors actually executing on that, sharing that information? Do you have processes in place and, the tech stack in place to make this actually work? And those are really separate questions. But I think if you can get all these 5 elements in place, your tech partner program will be very successful and it will meet your strategic goals. So I think we should dive into like each of these elements and sort of, really think through what happens if you don't have these things. What is your organization going to look like? And then what is it going to look like if you do have it? So the first one, strategic alignment. What happens when you don't have strategic alignment? And we know, from experience that there's a lot of partner people who are in a position where they don't have strategic alignment. And that's something that they have to come into the organization and make the case for to their executives, which I think there's a lot of articles and advice on how you do that. But what does it look like for people who don't have that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great list here, but I think that the biggest thing that I've actually seen in practice is you have parts of the organization, typically like business development, marketing, sales orgs, that really see the value in this, and maybe even the leadership in that. In those orgs also see the value. But then when it really comes down to execution, a lot of things die on the vine. So you end up with, these partnerships that have been papered and sales is really excited. But then when it comes to the rubber meeting the road for someone to build something, that alignment isn't there. And I think a lot of that comes down to misaligned KPIs between those departments, so that when new partnerships are penned or when a partnership program is being built, everyone in the organization understands what the value is. And I think, there's this idea that, engineers or whatever, like, don't think like salespeople. And I just don't think that that's fair to them. Like, I think everybody wants to see a business succeed and see their product that they're building being used. So aligning back to the goals of the partnership team in sort of furthering those results really helps. And then hopefully you won't have to compete with other departments for other priorities and have partners that are upset because either the integrations don't get built on your side, or the APIs are not great, or they can't get the dev support they need, or they can't get the co-marketing support they need. Really just having that sort of steering committee across all the departments to understand the stated goals of the business is super important.
Yeah, and I think it's important to call out that that competitiveness. I think especially on the revenue side, but also on the product side as well. You do see partnerships, people often feeling like they're in competition with sales and marketing. So they're framing it as, I'm going to get 15%. I'm going to drive 15% of my company's revenue. And you understand why they're saying it. It's probably because they feel like they've been neglected strategically. And so they want to show like, look, I'm important in this company. This is how much I'm driving. But the framing of that is competitive, right? Like if you are saying that, your goal is to take more of the share of the organization's revenue, then that means marketing and sales are going to be less, which, that's fine in the abstract. But the reality is you don't want to set yourself up to have attribution turf wars. And if how you're framing the conversation is, I have 20% of the revenue, sales is driving 40, marketing is driving 30, what have you, then when it comes to setting up those attribution models, which everyone eventually should have these multi-attribution models, you're going to get people fighting over what should count. Like, how much does a partner intel on the sales count? How much does a marketing webinar count? Those are conversations they're going to have. And if you set it up as a competition, those aren't going to be good conversations. But if you set up instead as, I'm driving X revenue, then you can drive more revenue, and marketing can drive more revenue, and sales can drive more revenue. So I think that's a really important way to get strategic alignment, is to not think of yourself as in competition with, marketing and sales for driving revenue.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it with the turf war. I think that's a very apt description. And for those of you that are in, some of the partnership groups, including the CSA, a lot of times there are questions that come up around exactly what Kelly is describing. Like, if in more complicated deals, especially, like, how should partnerships and sales sort of be incentivized, and how much does influence count versus like direct sourcing? So trying to think about that thoughtfully in the beginning and in a way that incentivizes everybody to try to close more business and make these successful, I think is very important.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about, I think that, that is one way, is to frame these conversations in a collaborative versus competitive metric. But what are some other ways that you can get strategic alignment in your organization?
So I think, I'm the beating drum of it all comes down to money typically, but every organization has like a vision and a north star of what they're trying to do, one or more key metrics. Really tying yourself specifically to those metrics and your success to what those are will make it easier for you. So again, it could be, I'm sure there's monetary goals, but it could also be number of users. It could be adoption of a certain feature. It could be marketing related, like press related, really figuring out how you fit into those goals is super important. And then communicating what you need to get that done and the results that you get out of that to leadership, hopefully in a direct way, I think is also super important, and something that surprisingly, I think doesn't always take place. I've talked to a lot of partnership folks who I know feel like very siloed, like they're kind of existing in a vacuum and don't necessarily feel like the rest of the organization understands what they're doing. And if you kick off the program and start with even like a little internal newsletter, maybe like, hey, this is what the partnership team is up to. This is what's on the docket. That can be really, really helpful. That also speaks obviously to communicating internally. I'm a big fan of over communicating wins when it comes to basically everything at a company. And I think this is no exception.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And when it comes to our partner programs, we sort of naturally think of different modes of communication for high touch and low touch partners. And I think when you think of low touch, you're going to have like a portal, marketing website, newsletters. And I think that's a good way to think about it internally as well. So, for leaders of other departments, you want to have regular meetings, right? You want to have that personal touch where you're actually communicating it yourself on a regular basis. But then for the longer tail of, say, the marketing team or the product team, like find ways, whether it's a newsletter, an internal wiki, a Slack channel, where you're not just getting in front of like the VP of product or the chief product officer, but you're also getting in front of the product team. You really want that message out there. And it really is a key part of partnerships, because partnerships is not established motion in the way that, say, marketing and sales is. It's kind of on the partnership person to circulate it internally and externally so that people, see what's going on, they understand the results, and they start to see the value. And so I think it's definitely worth thinking about that way.
Totally agree. And this is similar to what we were just discussing, really showing the value, continuing to communicate. I think case studies are amazing if you can do that to make business case. Like, hey, this customer said that they were able to achieve XYZ goal as a result of this partnership or this integration. And you may be surprised to hear that some of the impact that stuff does actually have. Like, I know for those of us that work on integration specifically, it's moving data between systems, right? But then when you really drill down into the commercial value that those end customers are getting from that, it can be pretty incredible, like millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars of revenue that these companies are able to realize as a result of integrations. I as an integration nerd, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think something that is great about where we are now versus, say, 2 to 3 years ago is there is a lot of data out there. There is no shortage of market data on the fact that integrations has a retention impact. So you can cite, on average, someone using one integration to our product is going to give a 15% boost in retention, if not more. And the data is out there, so you can find it. And I think if you are in a position of having to make that case internally, it's a good place to start, is cite the data until you can get your own data, which you do want to get, but you're going to have to start small because you may not have enough data at scale to make the case internally. But if you have the market data and then you sort of start small and getting the resources to show, say, the impact of one key integration, and then you can move on from there to start to scale up the program.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And shameless plug around data, Pandium.com, we've got a ton of great reports and a lot of great analysis about sort of the trends in the market that I know we've been told folks to use those to make cases to the executive teams often. So feel free to check that out.
So let's talk about cross-functional collaboration with product engineering. So this is kind of what you and I do all day, right? Like, we really work at the intersection of tech partnerships, product, and engineering. And I can't even count the number of partnership people that have come to us and they're like, we can't get enough product and engineering resources. They're focused on the core product. They look at integrations as a distraction, annoyance. None of the engineers really wants to work on it. Like, we see this all the time. I guess to start with that group of people, what happens when you don't have that alignment in product and engineering is just really focused on that core product roadmap. They're focused on the core product. They're excited about it. And they're looking at this as sort of like, if someone puts important customer puts in a ticket, they'll address it, but like they're really not focused on it on the core. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the high level is it just doesn't happen, right? Like there's no integrations. They just say no. Like typically that argument is happening, at the executive level between, maybe the P&E org and other sides of the fence. So if you can't get anything built, that's obviously going to be a problem with your tech partnerships. You then may try to rely on your partner to build, but that's like the sort of tale as old as time argument is who's going to build, right? So as much as you can control your own destiny, I think it's good to do it yourself. If they do get built, a lot of times, as Kelly mentioned, folks that are not Pandium don't want to work on this stuff. It's just not considered a super sexy part of a business. I disagree, but that is what I hear and what I've seen. So folks may just, be like, oh, we have this really important customer. They need this NetSuite thing. We're just going to hack it together. And the quality is not good. The support of it is typically quite poor. And then to this point on the bottom here, there's no way for other customers to discover it. So you end up with basically a product feature that has been half built that cannot be reused, which I think is worse almost than not building anything, right? Like just to be able to say that you have something, but have it be so non-performant and not realized by most of the company. I've talked to so many companies that have integrations built that like the CS and sales team don't even know about because there's like no centralized place to find even internally what exists. And then obviously, if you want your developer partners or your tech partners to build into you, you've got to have good APIs. They have to be documented. The documentation has to be up to date. There should be like samples and good developer support too, which is an important part and things that probably most of the folks on this call are not able to do.
Yeah, I think that's so important just because when you think about, as a partnership person, you might be fighting for these resources. And if you get some, but not enough, you can definitely end up in a situation where you're not going to be able to show the business impact because say you built a really crappy Salesforce integration, or alternatively, they built a good integration, but nobody's maintaining it and nobody's supporting it. So over time it becomes crappy. Then you're going to cease to see that business impact or value, and you're going to be in trouble because you're not going to be showing results. And the same thing with these integration marketplaces. At Pandium, we're in the process of doing this large study of APIs and integrations at hundreds of SaaS companies, and most Series C companies still don't have an in-app marketplace. So it's not necessarily in those cases going to be easy for customers to even find all the integrations and therefore use them. And that's where you get the business impact. So I think that's why, it's so important to make sure that you are getting enough product and engineering resources to do this stuff well so that the integrations are actually successful and that the customers are actually finding them and using them.
Totally agree.
So let's talk about, some of the ways to align with product engineering. So, I think a lot of people are in that position where they don't have a company that is ecosystem first and was built from the ground up to be interoperable and sort of in the DNA of the product department. What are some things that partnership people can do to try to get that alignment?
Yeah, so I think what I think is actually the most important is probably the hardest, which is to articulate that upfront investment saves time later. So like doing it correctly in the beginning will, or at least working in that direction, will actually make it much, much better. I mean, we talk to folks all day who have, as I described, some like really disparate situation in-house. There's some apps over here, some over here, no one really knows. And when they do want to scale out their program, it's like massive rebuilds. It's very disruptive. So really starting with a defined kind of process about how you're going to roll this stuff out from a technical perspective definitely helps. And pinging into the product's kind of motivation, integrations can be seen as like a feature of your product. So on the one hand, I think it's cool that these apps can be built pretty quickly and unlock a lot of value for our customer. And they should also increase product adoption generally, whether that's through more sales, through like specific features that, align really well with those things. So, the goal here is that you have more users of your product. And if you do these integrations correctly, you'll win those. Obviously, again, we all know about customer satisfaction. Like I've worked at a number of orgs where a lot of that customer satisfaction, those metrics were actually driven by product, and they were responsible for figuring out like who was using what and why. So any way that you can make that a better thing is better. And if you provide a good experience for your customer, or rather your tech partners, developers, you'll just be better off generally. I mean, I have my like hit list of companies that I think do really, really well with developer UX and have like really great docs and are just a pleasure to work with. And then there's also obviously the other side, where it's like, oh man, it's really, really a struggle to work on these things. So all of those ways, I think, help make this exercise a success.
Yeah. And I think one thing too that we've seen through our work at Pandium is, if you really can't get any resources, be willing to take a risk, right? Like we've had partnership people come to Pandium, they just can't get anything, and they're willing to take their own budget, to buy Pandium, to use our app team to build the native integrations that we support at scale, and just say, you know what, I'm just going to use my budget, and then I'm going to prove out that this works and that we're getting these business results. And that's a risk, right? Because you're taking your own budget, you're then putting it on the line that like the business results are going to come. But I think it's so important for partnership people to understand that you need to build or offer your customers, however they're being built, quality integrations, because that's where you get the business impact. So even if you have to be the person to say, okay, I'm going to get this done one way or another, and I'm going to show the results, and then we can continue the conversation, right? Because ultimately, product wants people using the product. They want happy customers. They want satisfied customers. So if you can roll that out, show that, this leads to happier customers. It leads to customers not just using the integration, but using the product more in general, then you're going to have a really strong start to that conversation when you're facing resistance, essentially.
Totally agree.
Now, what about customer success? Like, I feel like customer success doesn't really come up in conversations as much in sort of this world, but I think it really is so important. And I know you love customer success. You have professional services background. Why does it matter? Like, how does the customer success team play into this tech partnerships program?
It's so interesting that you say that too. It's not a part of the conversation often. And, I agree with that. Having worked on teams that have been on the receiving end of integrations that are not great. It is both a conversation that doesn't happen as often as it should, and also can be so painful for CS teams if they don't get like the support that they need, and the training and all of those things, because, you're really relying on your CS team to not just now be an expert in your own product, but also to have familiarity with other products and to be able to support whatever these apps do. So if you don't have good support, your customers are going to suffer, right? And I think the worst possible scenario for a business critical integration is like a silent failure. So it's just not running and nobody knows. That is worse than it not running at all, or worse than it not ever having been turned on. So poor support is going to just be poor support, right? Less integration usage, folks. I mean, you guys have all seen like app store reviews on various app stores where it's like, it didn't work in the beginning and that person's never going to come back, right? And they may churn off of a product because of that. Your customer support team are also the people that talk to your customers every day. So they should have a pretty good idea of what customers want to do and what they're currently doing, which may be different from how the app is built in the first sort of instance. And you will not be getting those amazing sort of like qualitative feedback results of the value if you're not pinging into customer success. Again, I always go back to sharing the wins with them and celebrating the things that they do that help your shared customers be successful.
Yeah. And I think, how do you put this into place? I think, one of the things I've heard that is really effective is sort of the education component and making sure that, there's someone on the CS team. To your point about learning another system, like it's not realistic to expect one CS person to know about 400 integrations. But I think even when they're partner built, it's realistic to have someone on the team who at least understands that system enough to provide some help and certainly direct the person to where they can learn more. But what are some other ways to sort of align with customer success and ensure that you're leveraging their knowledge and there's kind of a feedback loop there that's successful?
I think encouraging the feedback is really important. Again, I know CS folks sometimes are like the unsung heroes of organizations and may feel like feedback is not well received. But if you can get the feedback on like the integration functionality or what folks are saying they want to see, you can help translate some of that to the appropriate folks, whether that's your partners or your in-house team. I think providing education and training and also really good documentation will help folks self-serve. And then you'll be able to get information about satisfaction and retention that you can then bubble up to your C-suite, as we mentioned earlier. So I'm all about helping out the CS folks and celebrating them when these deployments go well. Kelly knows that. She hears me talk about it all the time.
In terms of showing value, getting on those surveys, like making sure that, they're even collecting the information in the first place is going to help you, because you really always want to have the qualitative data to supplement the quantitative data that you can get from usage. And CS is really in the best position to collect that data and to get that information from customers. So having a good relationship with them really can, further facilitate your ability to get strategic alignment. But also, I just think that when you do your job well too, it is a boon to customer success, because then customers are happier and they're getting more out of the product and they're more engaged. And that's what integrations can do when they're done well.
I agree.
So what about sales and marketing? I think sales and marketing, is something that we talk about a lot in the partnerships world is how do you sort of get that alignment. I think sales in particular, and it's, a lot of at least channel partnerships came out of sales. I mean, they're very closely tied to sales and really at the hip. So I think tech partnerships, maybe 3 or 5 years ago were often sort of at least starting out in that department. But, what does that look like for sales and marketing?
Yeah, I mean, if, salespeople should be incentivized by money, and marketing folks, I think, are also. So, if you don't have the buy-in from those parts of the organization, it's going to be very, very difficult to succeed. Even if you manage to get your product and engineering teams to build some crazy good stuff, if nobody is marketing it or selling it, no one will use it. And that also is a terrible use of resources to build something and then have nobody use it. And that will obviously reflect poorly on the partner managers. So, the CST might not want to be onboarding customers onto these integrations. You won't have any co-marketing. You probably won't have a plan for co-selling. And more generally, I think we're seeing, as mentioned earlier, that there can be some friction between partnerships and sales when it comes to like who gets credit for what. So really ensuring that you drive home the commercial values and selfishly like the individual, what each individual is going to get out of working with partners, I think is super important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, when it comes to integration and adoption, like product marketing can be so useful to making that happen seamlessly. And so I think having that alignment with the marketing department where they see the value of these partnerships and see it as a boon for them to have this sort of outsourced marketing team that's helping them to get their message out further, can just really go a long way to increasing the adoption and not on top of that, getting you more leads.
100%.
So what are some ways that we can, effectively align with marketing and sales?
So a lot of it comes down to the data, right? And this should be data that can actually be captured in a reasonably easy way. Like if you're sharing leads, if you're sharing deals, obviously you can use a tool like Crossbeam to be able to show that there should be a relationship there. And then highlighting, I think, over and over, like when you're getting partner assisted deals, when a deal closes with a partner because of your team, sharing those wins and potentially the dollars that are associated with that are really important. Setting up the ability to track influence is really important. A lot of companies don't do that in the beginning. I think it's hard to figure out exactly what that means, but setting up like a very strong sort of rubric about what influence actually is for your specific company and your type of customer is important. Obviously, if you bring more deals, sales and marketing are going to be happy. And then hopefully they will give you more resources and maybe give you a partner marketer, which would be pretty cool. And I would say make it easy for the folks that are on your team to collaborate with partners if you want them to do that directly. I mean, I know we're all in like 1,000 Slack channels now, but I do see that it's really effective when you enable those folks that are maybe frontliners to be able to talk directly to partners, collaborate on deals. Same thing with CS, actually, to go back to them. I think having the CS team sort of have point persons within each organization just cuts down on cycles and will make it better for your shared deal.
Yeah. And I think right now with marketing in particular, there's really this huge opportunity around marketing data. We see that, cookies are being sunsetted. There's a lot more in terms of privacy regulations that is making it a lot harder to get third-party data. So I think what can be really effective to getting alignment with marketing is sort of convincing them of the value of using second-party data, which tools like Crossbeam and Reveal, you can get a lot of high-quality data that is second party. And the nice thing about second party data is that it is high quality because you can really control, is this a partner and organization I trust? And it's coming directly from them. So you know the source. And it's also scalable, right? So, you can't, the problem with zero party data or first party data is it's hard to scale. Like there's a limit to how much you can collect directly, but you can really scale out your partnerships, but still maintain that level of quality. And the truth is marketing departments really aren't using this data very much. They're just not. So there's this huge opening for partnerships to bring up that conversation and really demonstrate, hey, you're losing third-party data. You're not, there's all these privacy regulations. You're not going to get as much. It's not as high quality. Here's this huge source that if we collaborate with our partners, we can be using this data to like drive our marketing campaigns and set our strategy. So I would definitely recommend, having that conversation. Marketers love to use data. And so if you can give them higher quality data that works, they're going to, love you back. So I think that is just really a big opening right now. We're going to see that more and more in the next 2 years. All right. So what about partner alignment? We've been talking about all these internal departments and, and this is the challenge of partnerships, right? You not only have to align internally, but you also have to align externally with all your partners. And what happens if you don't? What does this look like over time?
Yeah. And I'll add on to that too. Like the person that you're talking to on the other side is also probably a partner manager who is also managing all their internal folks. So it's just like, it actually is sort of just explodes out exponentially with like how many departments you're sort of touching through all of these other companies. But obviously if, the company that you're partnering with is not aligned with the goals that you guys have, you are probably going to have a crappy integration or at least one that's not as good as it could be, because you need to understand what your shared customers want to do. If you're not co-branding and co-marketing together, you're going to be missing go-to-market opportunities. Your partners might not want to share with you things about installations or how shared customers are using apps, or if deals are falling through, why that is, or feedback about your own organization. And obviously, a lot of you guys spend a lot of time working on these partnerships. So when this stuff doesn't work, there can be hurt feelings, I will say, resentment.
Yeah. And I think that's important. Like resentment is going to crop up if you don't have great communication, clear expectations. And it's just right for partners feeling like they're giving more, and they may not be giving more, right? It's just there's no visibility or clarity around it. And so they start to feel like, hey, I'm putting in all this work, but I'm not seeing the results. So I start to feel resentful, even if there are results. So I think that that's really important. And these problems only get worse over time, right? Like you build an integration, but if you're not having, regular touch points with your partners to see where their product is evolving, where their API is evolving, over time, your use cases can diverge. The integration can become, not very valuable. And I think that, that is solved by staying in alignment with your partner.
100%.
So what are the ways to get partner alignment? I think having regular communication is sort of a key to the process, and really having it not only with your strategic partners, but finding the ways to have it with the long tail of partners, because you're not going to, maybe disclose as much about your 12 to 18 month plan around your product roadmap to your long tail of partners, but you should still have regular communications. Like they shouldn't be blindsided by a huge product change when they have 6 weeks to update their integration. What are some other ways that you kind of ensure you're aligned with your partner and you're staying aligned?
Yeah, I think what you said about communication and transparent prioritization is really key. I think that is both in terms of prioritization of your own internal product and what you as a company are doing with your roadmap so that your partners are aware of that. And also prioritization about the types of partners that you want to work with and the types of gaps that you're trying to fill, whether that's, again, you're looking for specific products that are going to fill feature gaps, or you're looking to have access to a massive customer set in a partner. So really just sharing what your high level goals are will help them determine the level of effort that they want to work with you guys, and also where they fit in. And then on the other side, I think understanding what your partners want to get out of this is really important. Having penned contracts is all nice and good, but if there aren't actually leads flowing back and forth, if no one's using the apps, if you don't go to market together, there's not a whole lot of value there. It's kind of a vanity metric. So really understanding what they're looking to get out of their relationship with you and communicating back to that almost like a sale every time you have those conversations, checking in, seeing, hey, you had these goals, how are we performing against those is really important. And then as we said here, shared tracking. I mean, again, it comes down to the data, starting to capture that early so that it's simple things like how many customers installed an integration. A lot of businesses don't know that because there was no way for them to track it. It wasn't implemented from the very beginning. So some really basic things, I think, can go a really long way on both sides.
Yeah. And I think when we talk about a tech partner program on the long tail, it's important to really develop ways to offer transparency, which I think goes to, what most organizations do is they have program tiers, but I think, and that is the best way to organize it because it enables that transparency, but really being specific about what you're looking for in each tier, what the partner needs to do to get to the next level. And then I think giving opportunities for partners to give feedback, not just if they're strategic partners, but for example, when you have a developer portal for your partners, request a feature, have plenty of touch points where they can put in their opinions and they can share their point of view. We also see people doing surveys of their partners, getting an NPS score for partners specifically. And I think that is a great way to get in touch with your long tail of partners and get a pulse on how is your program working for partners? How aligned are you? Because you don't want to get into a position where your partners are all feeling ripped off because you're charging a 30% revenue share. They don't feel like they're getting that value. A 30% revenue share could make sense, but you have to determine that, and you have to be in collaboration with your partners and not just your top partners who probably have special deals anyway, but that long tail of partners to understand what are you getting out of this? What benefits are you driving from this? And is what I'm extracting an even balance from your point of view? All right. And I think we've been talking through this whole conversation, right, about data. And I think, there's two components to everything that we've covered so far, both the strategic alignment, the partner alignment, and the cross-functional collaboration. It really requires efficient workflows and results tracking, right? Because if you can't show results, ultimately you're going to be in a very weak position when you're coming to conversations with your C-suite or with your partners, because you're not going to be able to leave any concerns that they may have that this isn't working, this isn't effective. And then I think on the efficient workflow side, there are so many stakeholders to make ecosystems and partnerships successful that if you don't have this in place, and a lot of organizations, mid-market companies even still don't, they're still running off email and Google Sheets, and that's just not scalable. So, what does it look like when organizations don't have this in place?
It looks like very sad tech partner managers, I would say. And it's funny because not having good processes hurts you in sort of like two distinct ways that also are sort of commingled. One is that like you may feel really overworked, like everything is all over the place, your inbox is terrible, there's a bajillion projects going on, you can't figure out what to work on. And also when you then go to your boss or your boss's boss or whatever to ask for more humans, more money, more tooling, whatever, you won't have the ammo, as Kelly said, to say like, I need this because like partners are stalling in their onboarding at this specific stage, or these integrations are not working well. We need to refactor them if we want to have that strategic partnership. So trying to be as organized as possible in the beginning is important. I think a Google Sheet is better than not a Google Sheet. And also, if you have cross-functional alignment internally, you can sometimes offload some of these things to other folks within an organization. But at the end of the day, if you don't have that data and results tracking, you're not going to be able to know, number one, if things are going off the rails necessarily, and you're definitely not going to get that leadership buy-in.
And so how do we get this? I think, one of the most interesting things in the last, 2 to 5 years, and this includes Pandium, right, is this evolution of partner technology that is designed to solve this problem. I think 3 to 5 years ago, there really was not that much out there. Now, there still isn't when you compare it to marketing and sales technology, right? We're probably, in terms of the number of vendors for partner technology, it's probably where marketing technology was 8 to 10 years ago. But we've seen tons of money flowing to the space because it's sort of, the business model itself is taking off and it's just a must have. So I think it is important to use the tools that are out there, because whether it's something like Pandium to help you power the integration infrastructure, or Crossbeam to enable you to data share, and they just acquired Partnered, which helps with the tracking on the sales side. And then you have PRMs like Workspan and Pronto, which are, integrate with Salesforce that kind of surfaces data to the sales team and within the PRM so the organization can stay aligned. So I definitely think availing yourself of that technology is, and do you see more organizations using that effectively? I've definitely seen it crop up more and more, while at the same time still seeing a lot of organizations who are just discovering it.
Yeah, I think folks are adopting more technology, and that is also like a side effect of the market just maturing for partnerships generally. Like when you look at like segments that have adopted like partner technology kind of earlier, you're looking at companies that operate in verticals that have a more mature concept of ecosystem, right? So I think as folks, number one, start to mature their own program, number two, there's more technology that serves these programs, and also people switching jobs now and having a partnership role for like second, third time in some instances, we're going to see more adoption of that kind of technology. I do think it's important also to iterate with that. I think there's a lot more coming out now, and not every tool is going to be perfect for every use case, but definitely try to utilize what makes sense for you and your business. And again, ties back to the business goals of the organization for everybody, but also, at the sort of leadership side. And I also love Become Friends with Operations. I think if you yourself can't self-serve with that data, you need to be able to ask somebody. And if that means like, dropping off a cookie on their desk or, whatever that might look like, having someone who can get that data for you will just make your life so much easier.
Yeah. And you want to be on those revenue dashboards, right? Like, I think in a lot of cases, operations or the data team, and they're going to own those revenue dashboards. They're going to kind of control the central operation of everything. So you don't want to be in a position where, you've collected this data in your PRM, but it's disconnected from the sales and marketing team. It's not on the revenue reports. Like you definitely want to make sure. And I think the plus side is, a lot of the revenue data that you might need is in the organization. So it already exists. I think the product and data around the integrations themselves needs to be built, or, you have to use a tool like Pandium to surface that information because it's not, it's new. And so you need someone, whether it's your partner or your product and engineering team, to create that visibility. So that's going to be, a harder case for you. But I think the other thing to think about with partner technology, because I've seen this in every type of partner technology, like I've seen a lot of people talk about this with PRMs. They're looking for a silver bullet. So they're looking for something off the shelf that just meets every single need of their program. And the truth is that usually does not exist. And in rare cases, does that exist? And that's partly because of the complexity of the problem that we're dealing with, but it's also because of the lack of maturity in the field. But I mean, we look at Salesforce, right? Like if you get Salesforce, you're pretty much going to need like a full-time developers and admins working on it. So like when you have a complex use case, you're going to have to expect to customize something yourself. But, I think I definitely see people be like, well, this PRM isn't my silver bullet, so I'm just not going to buy anything. And then they think maybe they're going to build something in-house, but they don't have like enough internal resources. So they end up sticking with a Google form on their website to onboard their partner, which then like they use Zapier to hook up to their emails or something like. So I would say like in this case, like the perfect is the enemy of the good. Like you're not going to be honest about if you're not going to get one of these solutions that aren't a silver bullet, what are you going to end up doing in-house really? And what is that going to look like? And is that really better than the PRM? I would think about it that way because that's something I see a lot in conversations.
Yeah, I'd also say to add on to that, like if you're doing this for the first time or your org is doing this for the first time, meaning having tech partnerships and implementing partner technology, these tools should be able to inform you as to like best practices. So instead of trying to figure out like, how should I manage this stuff? Like these are pieces of software that are built by people that have seen this likely hundreds or thousands of times and have opinions about how it should be done. So I think there is some level of customization, as Kelly said, if you have really sort of unique needs, but also, like leaning into how these tools, the opinions that they have about how these things should be structured and what should be tracked, can also help inform best practices in your own like internal processes. All right. I think that was our entire presentation, but we do have some time, about 5 minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions, you can throw them into the Q&A or into the chat.
Yeah, I think one, thing too that we didn't really touch on is the monetization side of this. I think that's something that organizations really struggle with for their tech partner program because there isn't really one established model. And, this large research project that we're doing, I saw that, so I looked at the top 100 SaaS companies in terms of size. So the 50 largest public and private SaaS companies, and 14 of them had transactional marketplaces. And then when you got down to the Series D, I think it was something like 7. So, in terms of integration marketplaces, most companies aren't making their marketplace transactional, which, makes a certain amount of sense. There can be only so many transactional marketplaces because if people are if a merchant is buying, 20 apps through Shopify, that's probably a good experience for them because they don't have to manage 20 subscriptions. But then they don't also want to go to like a smaller vendor and be buying 20 other ones because that kind of defeats the purpose. But, we do see a lot of revenue shares that are not through a transactional marketplace, but just, you've gotten this lead through us. So give us, 20% is probably the running average. What are your thoughts on how people should think through this decision, since there isn't like one model that everybody's using?
Yeah, I mean, myself personally, I feel like the idea of like selling integrations is basically dead. Customers just, especially B2B customers, just don't have a lot of tolerance for that. To be like, oh, hey, you want to hook up your QuickBooks account to your order entry system, that's going to be $20 a month. Folks are like, what? Why? So that I think is aging out. That was definitely a thing that we saw, maybe like 5-10 years ago. And to your point, I agree with you, Kelly, about the transactional nature. I think you really have to be sort of like the big fish if you're going to be doing like subscription reselling and stuff like that. You really need to rely on a large volume. And technology partnerships are a little less direct in terms of like handing over leads than, let's say, like channel partnerships or resellers, obviously. So, I think the rev share model is the model that we see the most. And also it's the model that I think most appropriately aligns with technology partnerships, when really a lot of the value is that end customer seeing your logo a bunch of places. So it's not even necessarily that they get to your product directly from that integration page or whatever. It's that sort of influence and subconscious social proof. I think that really can drive business. So I think that lead sharing and rev share is really the future. Kel, I don't know what your thoughts are. You've been doing all this research.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a common model that organizations still do offer is they put integrations, especially ones that are really robust, that they built themselves on higher paid plans. I think customers are used to seeing that as a product feature. I agree. Sure. While you do have some, places like Atlassian where you're being charged per integration, or you can also have free integrations on their marketplace. But for the most part, I don't think businesses are used to buying that way. So you're going to be fighting an uphill battle if that's the model that you try to implement. So yeah, I agree. I think, revenue share, and that goes back to partner and strategic alignment, making sure that your partners feel like they're getting the value. I would just flag, please think about the traffic you're getting from those integration marketplaces, because I do see a lot in the market that people are not capturing that. So they are sending a lot of high quality traffic, whether it's from their public integration marketplace or for their app, and the partner's just not tracking it. So at a minimum, just make sure that you have UTM codes or some other mechanism in there, and then send it. Make sure your partners are capturing that and tracking it, because they usually can in Google Analytics, and that might be bringing them a lot of value. If they're not seeing it, they're not going to be as happy. So Eric has a question really quick. Other PRMs that we would recommend, I think Pronto is a good one. Workspan is an interesting one. Partner Stack, especially if you are into the affiliate marketing, or you want to do what I just said with the links in your marketplace, you can use Partner Stack for that. They take care of the taxes and the payment processing. So I think a lot of companies like that they just go through one bill rather than having to process all the payments for all the individual partners. Reveal is another product like Crossbeam. They have a heavier presence in Europe as well in their user base. So if you have European partners, that you might find a lot of them on there. Salesforce has a PRM product. It's, I've heard it's very complicated, to implement, but if you and your partners are heavy into the Salesforce ecosystem, it might be worth checking out. Zinfini is another one that I've heard pretty good things about. Any other communities like CS? There's partnership leaders. There's Fernio. There's a SaaS Ecosystem Alliance. Those are all groups where you can get, partner education and resources. Hopefully Sunir won't kill us for mentioning that, but I think they're all great communities and offering really good content. It looks like we're at time, but if you are not already in the Cloud Software Association, please go join. It's an amazing group. There's over 4,000 people in there. And, I would highly recommend joining. And please check out the SaaS Connect Metaverse, June 23rd. A great way to meet people in virtual world and not have to leave your house. Thank you so much for joining us, Cristina.
Yeah, thank you for the interview, and thanks to everyone who joined. I'm sure we will see you out there. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.